Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Nathan Bryan. Dr. Nathan Bryan has been involved in nitric oxide research for the past 18 years and has made many seminal discoveries in the field. These discoveries and findings have transformed the development of safe and effective functional bioactive natural products in the treatment and prevention of human disease and may provide the basis of new preventative or therapeutic strategies in many chronic diseases. Dr. Bryan has published a number of highly cited papers and authored or edited 5 books. He is an international leader in molecular medicine and nitric oxide biochemistry.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Lymphatic Insights. I'm incredibly grateful to have Dr. Nathan Bryan with me today. We're going to be talking about nitric oxide and its role, especially from a lymphatic point of view. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Desiree, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So can you just give us a little bit of background on yourself, just so that our listeners can actually learn the incredible, amount of knowledge that you've gained over the years? I'd love to hear some more.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in small town Texas here in the States and went to the University of Texas where I got a degree in biochemistry. And from there, I went to LSU School of Medicine where I also completed a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology. I went to Boston University School of Medicine as a cardiology fellow and spent a couple of years there really trying to understand nitric oxide and vascular biology. And then from there, I went to the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, where I had my first independent research career as a professor of molecular medicine. But really, all the academics have been really focused on nitric oxide biochemistry, nitric oxide physiology. How does the human body make nitric oxide? What goes wrong in people that can't make it, and then how do we correct that?
So what brought you to that passion?
I was, a young student at LSU, and, a Nobel Prize had just been awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide, and we were fortunate to have one of the gentlemen that shared the Nobel Prize for the discovery of nitric oxide come and speak before us. And, it was a fascinating time, fascinating field in science and medicine. We knew it was an important molecule, but there were so many unanswered questions in the field that I thought it was, interesting enough. And, I'll never forget Lou Ignarro was the guy who came and gave a lecture. And he said, Nathan, if you can ever figure out how to restore and recapitulate nitric oxide production and signaling, it'll change the world. Because at that time, even Lou knew that, there's really not a single disease where nitric oxide wouldn't positively affect. And so that really got my attention and thought, wow, this is really an important area of research, and if we could crack the code on some of this, we could really leave a lasting legacy. And, fast forward 25, 30 years now, here we are, we've answered a lot of those fundamental questions.
It's amazing. So I'm going to learn a little bit. We're going to learn a lot more about this soon, but I just want to, because we are all about lymphatics. So, you've done all this incredible, study training involved in different universities, etc. So did you learn anything about lymphatics in that whole process?
Oh, no, look, even as a student learning physiology and pathology, we learn a lot about lymphatics, even in vascular biology, because similar to the blood vessels in the cardiovascular system, which the lymphatics play a crucial role on, there's a lot of crosstalk. The lymphatic blood vessels are lined with endothelial cells. So similar to the arteries and veins and the blood vessels, the lymphatics rely on the function of our endothelial cells to allow adequate solute exchange, to allow contractility and lymph movement and lymph drainage. So similar in the cardiovascular system, if we develop endothelial dysfunction and we lose not just the barrier function of the endothelium, but the contractility and the vascular motility and the vasodilatory, vasoconstrictive properties, then we develop, in many cases, lymphedema. We have, a lot of things that go wrong, but, it all boils down to the function of the endothelial cells and the endothelial cells' ability to produce nitric oxide.
Yeah. So, in your understanding over the years of the lymphatic system, has anything changed? Like, have you seen it evolve? Like, has it created any insights for you, especially considering nitric oxide through the process?
About 15 or 20 years ago, when I was still at the Institute of Molecular Medicine at UT Health Science Center in Houston, we collaborated with a professor there who was specifically looking at lymphatic imaging. So they developed a dye that you could see through in real time kind of imaging. And we could look at lymph motility, lymph drainage in certain patients. Really in cancer patients that had a number of lymph nodes removed, and obviously they developed lymphedema. So we could use this dye to track the motility and the mobility of the lymph system. And then, the challenge was then, or at least the thought process, and we never really followed up on it, was if we can give nitric oxide, or we can restore the production of nitric oxide and restore endothelial function within the lymphatic system itself, could we then mobilize that lymph, eliminate the lymphedema, and allow for normal lymph drainage? That was new technology back then. I'm guessing it's probably been 15, 16 years ago when we looked at that, really, but it was really fascinating to be able to see in real time, through muscle contraction in normal patients and those with lymphedema, just the complete lack of mobility and complete stagnation of the lymphatic system.
Yeah. And what was the outcomes of the research? Can you remember?
At that time, it was just development of the dyes that we could actually validate, verify to use as a diagnostic tool, and then measure that and use it as a tool to then start to develop novel therapeutics that could mobilize the lymph and eliminate a lot of the edema that you see in many patients. But we never followed up on it. I left the university years later, and I'm not sure if Eva, the lady that we're collaborating with, is still there or not.
And in your expertise, what do you think the most crucial role is of the lymphatic system?
Well, look, it's solute exchange. It's to make sure that the cardiovascular system has the salts, the nutrients, the metabolites it needs for normal vascular function, for tissue oxygenation. And the lymph system is kind of the filtering system of that. Along with the lymph nodes and the liver and the kidneys, it's a way to, maintain kind of normal homeostasis. And if one of those systems goes wrong, we get swelling, we get edema, we get a buildup of toxins. So the lymphatic system is extremely important in maintaining normal homeostasis in the human.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool system. That works in hand with circulatory. Those two have got to work well together. So, and is there a common misconception of the lymphatic system that you've come across in your years?
No, I mean, there's really just not a lot of awareness in the importance of the lymphatic system, specifically in the general population. Obviously, healthcare practitioners and physicians know a lot about the lymphatic system. I don't think there's a lot of misconception. I just think there's an overall lack of awareness, and I think that's why these are so important. Because if you have swelling in your hands or feet, a lot of times, the first thing is, well, it's congestive heart failure. You're getting pooling and, insufficient venous return and pooling of fluid. But, you have to look at the function of the lymphatic system and making sure you're moving that. That's where physical activity comes into play. That's where the valves in our veins become very important. So they get some type of valvular disease or venous disease, that can lead to the pooling and lymphedema in the extremities. So I just think people just need to be more aware of it and then, ask the right questions to the physician.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're also seeing that not many physicians know a lot either. In my career, anyway, 20 odd years. But it's just starting to ask the questions. I think you're very right there. And so let's move into nitric oxide, because I came across a paper years ago about it enhancing the permeability of the lymphatic vessels. So I've always been fascinated, taken it for a while, even found, I wasn't too sure of those. Have you seen their little saliva tests to check your nitric oxide? I don't know how well they work, but it's been fascinating for me. So let's go deep dive into the nitric oxide side and then bring back into the fact of how it does help from a lymphatic point of view, because I believe it controls the activity of the lymphatic pump as well. So let's start learning a little bit about as much as you can in a short period of time that our listeners would understand on nitric oxide and its value to the body.
Yeah. It's a gas, and it's an interesting signaling molecule, because once it's produced inside the lining of the blood vessels and in many other cell types beside the endothelium, that it's a gas and it's gone in less than a second. But once that gas is produced, it signals, it activates second messenger system, where it leads to, vasodilation, opening up the lumen of the blood vessel. It downregulates adhesion molecules. It normalizes blood pressure. It improves tissue oxygenation. It mobilizes stem cells. It activates mitochondrial biogenesis and improves mitochondrial ATP production. And it prevents our telomeres from shortening, the ends of our chromosomes that determine how long we live. And that's just a short list of the many important biological effects of nitric oxide. So, a Nobel Prize was awarded in 1998 for the discovery of nitric oxide in the cardiovascular system as a signaling molecule in the cardiovascular system. That really started this entire field. So now what we had focused on for the past 25 years is, number one, we had to understand, how does the human body make this molecule? Because you really can't figure out the etiology of disease or symptoms that arise from nitric oxide if we don't realize how the human body makes it. And then number two is, what symptoms manifest as a result of nitric oxide deficiency? And then what goes wrong in the people that can't make it? Once we understand how the human body makes nitric oxide, we could then start to determine, okay, what leads to a loss of nitric oxide production? And those were the three fundamental questions we spent more than a decade on. And then once we understood those and had the answers to those, then we could start asking the question, how do we restore nitric oxide production? How do we prevent the decline in nitric oxide production in patients? And so, very briefly, there's the enzyme, an enzyme called nitric oxide synthase that's found in the lining of the blood vessels that makes nitric oxide. The older we get, the less functional that enzyme becomes. And that's what leads to high blood pressure, things like sexual dysfunction, dementia, exercise intolerance. And then, a short time thereafter, it was discovered that the nitric oxide can be produced by the diet and by the role of oral bacteria. And this explains things like a plant-based diet, Mediterranean diet, a Japanese diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, or the DASH diet. Because a lot of these food choices in those dietary patterns that are known to confer cytoprotection, anti-cancer, protection from cardiovascular disease, they're foods that have a high concentration of inorganic nitrate. And then when we consume these, the bacteria that live in and on our body metabolize this molecule, nitrate, NO3-, into nitrite and nitric oxide. And humans don't have this capability, so we're 100% dependent upon the bacteria that live in and on our body. And now that creates a whole new kind of Pandora's box, because, in the U.S., 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash every day. There's fluoride in our toothpaste, which is an antiseptic. We overprescribe antibiotics, even for viral infections, which makes no sense. So this whole hygiene hypothesis of disease has merit, because if we destroy the microbiome in our mouth, in our gut, and all body parts, then this is known to cause systemic disease. And part of the mechanism of that is because it's completely inhibiting nitric oxide production. And then the other problem are antacids. Antacids are prescribed routinely in the U.S., and now you don't even have to have a prescription for these drugs like Prilosec, Prevacid, Nexium, omeprazole, pantoprazole. These are over-the-counter drugs now, and they're very dangerous. They completely shut down nitric oxide production, causing heart attacks, strokes, and Alzheimer's. So very dangerous drugs, and we have to educate people and really encourage people to get off of these very dangerous drugs.
Which comes back to the way they're eating again, and the microbiome in the gut, right?
Yeah.
So what are the symptoms? So if you are, I think some of the research is always around breathing right through your nose stimulates nitric oxide and all these. So there's some of the ways, we'll talk about those in a minute. But what are the symptoms for you to be able to know whether you're low in nitric oxide or you're not producing?
Well, and again, because there are no labs like, for vitamin D, if we want to know what your vitamin D levels are, we can draw blood and get a number and then figure out where you are. Same thing with cholesterol or triglycerides. We don't have that capability with nitric oxide because it's a gas. So really the only thing we have to rely on are the symptoms. So number one, the first sign and symptom of nitric oxide deficiency is what we call erectile dysfunction. And this isn't just a male disease. It's a male and female, because if you can't dilate the blood vessels of the sex organs, then you can't get engorgement, and we develop erectile dysfunction. And that dilation of the blood vessels is due to nitric oxide production. So if you can't make nitric oxide, you don't dilate the blood vessels of the sex organs, you don't get the increase in blood flow and engorgement, and men develop ED and women become anorgasmic and same sexual dysfunction. So that's first sign and symptom. Number two, you start to see an elevation in blood pressure. Because nitric oxide is the main vasodilator that opens up the blood vessels, if you lose the ability to produce this, then you've got the same volume of blood pumping through much smaller blood vessels. And that causes an increase in blood pressure. And 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure, so it's a symptom of nitric oxide deficiency most of the time. The third thing is people start to develop exercise intolerance, because if you can't increase blood flow to the working skeletal muscles by producing nitric oxide and dilating the blood vessels, then you tire easily, you get short of breath walking up a flight of stairs. And then the other thing is metabolic disease. Nitric oxide is involved in insulin signaling and glucose uptake. 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unfit. And then if you allow this to go and it progresses, then you start to get vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, and there you have it. I mean, so really every age-related chronic disease can be traced back to insufficient nitric oxide production as part of the problem. It may not be the only problem. Mechanistically, it's contributing to the onset and progression of chronic disease.
It's amazing. I didn't realize it was quite across that whole area. I mean, I read something about how it even regulates the activation of immune cells, like it can be involved in that process too, right?
Well, that's a completely different isoform. So our immune cells, our macrophages, neutrophils, monocytes, produce nitric oxide as part of our innate immune response. And this enzyme is upregulated after about 4 hours of, an infection or an injury. So this enzyme has to be transcribed in the nucleus. But this enzyme produces a lot of nitric oxide over a short period of time. And that nitric oxide produced by our immune cells binds to the iron sulfur centers of bacteria. So it shuts down bacterial respiration, kills bacterial infections, prevents virus from replicating. So it's how our body protects itself from bacteria, from viruses, from pathogens, really any foreign invading life form. Nitric oxide can shut it down and protect us from the invasion. And people that are immunocompromised can't make nitric oxide, become immunocompromised, because now these bacteria will settle, or virus can enter our cells and rapidly propagate throughout the body. And if we can't mobilize an immune response, we can't make nitric oxide, then the virus takes hold and takes over the replication cycle of the cell, and people get sick and die from it.
So that leads me into, how do we make it? Like you mentioned, you studied about how do we make it. Just take us down that pathway now.
Well, the enzyme nitric oxide synthase converts an amino acid called L-arginine into nitric oxide. And this is a very energetically and kinetically unfavorable reaction. It's a 5-electron oxidation reaction to produce nitric oxide. And so that's the second-to-second regulation of blood vessel tone and vasodilation, regulating blood flow. Like, for instance, if I'm trying to recall memory and figure out where I left my keys, I've got to increase blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, and we do that through nitric oxide. The other is through, as I mentioned, the bacteria in the crypts of the tongue and in our mouth that convert nitrate to nitrite. Then we swallow the nitrite in our saliva. And as long as we have stomach acid production, then that nitrite becomes nitric oxide gas in the lumen of the stomach. We can detect it in the exhaled breath, through expectoration, the gas in the lumen of the stomach. So that's where, things like antiseptics, Listerine, Scope, antiseptic mouthwash, fluoride-based toothpaste that completely kill the oral microbiome. And then things like antacids, shutting down stomach acid production, we completely shut down nitric oxide production. And so, then a sedentary lifestyle is what leads to it, a diet high in sugar. Sugar sticks to the enzymes and basically doesn't allow these proteins and enzymes to move and do their job. So you become dysfunctional. So it's really a sedentary lifestyle, a diet high in sugar that completely shuts down nitric oxide production. And that's unfortunately what we see in the U.S. and many other westernized countries today.
Yeah, I think it's everywhere. It's not just the U.S. Just made more aware of.
We're
in
leading
the
the
US.
charge, I can tell you that.
So if you were to then, you've got an incredible product. We're going to talk about that soon, but let's just talk about the natural ways. What is the option? I remember years ago there was a powder made from beetroot. Like it was a beetroot powder. That was one of the big ones way back. But what are the natural ways that you can start to increase? Obviously we've talked about removing antacids, getting off like your Listerines, those kind of things, improving the microbiome. But what else can we do to encourage the increase of nitric oxide?
Yeah, well, the first thing you got to do is stop doing the things that inhibit its natural production. And that's, as you mentioned, get rid of fluoride, in your toothpaste, stop using mouthwash if you use it, and get off antacids. Now that releases the brakes on the body's ability to produce this natural molecule. But we can enhance it. Moderate physical exercise. Now, we used to say 20 to 30 minutes of moderate physical exercise a day. Now we know that this high-intensity interval training, 2 to 3 to 5 minutes a day is enough to stimulate nitric oxide production. Deep breathing, that enzyme that's found in the lining of the blood vessels is also found in our nasal epithelium. So when we do nasal breathing, it activates nitric oxide production, and we can deliver that nitric oxide into the lower airways. It acts as a bronchodilator. It's a vasodilator, so you improve oxygen uptake, oxygen exchange. And that's why deep breathing exercise can lower blood pressure, because it's producing nitric oxide, leads to vasodilation, bronchodilation. So those are the big ones. And then, a balanced diet in moderation, green leafy vegetables, which are typically enriched in nitrate. This is the complete avoidance of sugar and simple carbohydrates that lead to a quick elevation in blood sugar.
So was beetroot one? Was it a thing, or was it just kind of one of those things that,
The beet juice came on the radar back in 2012 in the London Olympic Games.
Mm-hmm.
And even prior to that, there were groups in the UK publishing on the exercise performance enhancement effects of beetroot juice. Because beetroot juice, in some instances, contain a high amount of nitrate. So when you consume it, if you have the right oral bacteria and you have stomach acid production, it can lead to nitric oxide production and enhance exercise performance. So really everything that those studies were designed to do was a nitric oxide-related effect. But then you saw a flooding of the market with beetroot powders from companies who didn't know anything about the science. So about 95% of the beetroot products on the market are just what we call dead beets. There's no nitric oxide activity. There's no biological activity whatsoever. They're just selling you really a dead beet, desiccated beet powder in hopes that you buy it, but you don't get an effect from it. In fact, we use those as placebos in our clinical trials. So if you understand the science and how to optimize nitric oxide production and ferment the beet and pre-convert it to a usable form that's not dependent upon the oral microbiome, now that's how you create a very potent nitric oxide releasing beetroot product. And that's what we've done with our fermented beet powders. Excuse me.
So let's lead that perfectly into your product range. Because I've been using it, I had electric shock to the heart, so I've always had a bit of an issue with, the permeability of my blood vessels, let's put it that way. And, I took it for a while and noticed a lot, and then I went off it for a while because I like to, just test. That's who I am. And then I did notice a difference that when I went off it. So let's talk about your products and what you've done differently and how they differentiate to what's on the market.
Yeah. Well, we make a line of products called N101, and those are at n101.com. But starting with the beet product, because, the frustration that I had with these companies selling consumers beetroot products that really provide no benefit. So I thought, okay, this could kill an entire field, because if people think that beetroot's providing nitric oxide, they take that and they don't get a nitric oxide benefit, their interpretation is, well, nitric oxide doesn't work. Nitric oxide's not that important. And that's a problem for me. So I created a beetroot product that actually produces nitric oxide gas. And and the other problem with beet is, the majority, 2 out of 3 Americans don't like the taste of beets. It's the third least liked vegetable in the world. And it causes your urine to turn pink and your feces to turn pink, and people think they have a bleed or, bladder cancer or colon cancer, and it causes a lot of anxiety. So what we've done is a little bit different. We ferment the beets to concentrate the nitric oxide activity. We take out the oxalates, which beets are typically high in oxalates, and there's some people that are prone to kidney stones. So we've taken the oxalates out, and we've taken the beet pulp, the beet taste out of that. So now we make a fermented beet powder called NO Beets. It's a white powder, doesn't look or taste like beets, but it's the most potent nitric oxide beetroot powder on the market. It's great for an energy boost or a pre-workout is how we position that product. But really the cool technology I developed many years ago was an orally disintegrating tablet, and that's our nitric oxide N101 lozenge. And this lozenge sits in the mouth for about 5 to 6 minutes. It slowly dissolves, and as it's dissolving, we're releasing nitric oxide gas. And we published in 2007 that nitric oxide is a hormone. So what this lozenge is doing, it's a form of hormone replacement therapy. So similar to testosterone or estrogen in women, if you're low in testosterone, we give you hormone replacement therapy. We give you testosterone or estrogen itself. Same thing with nitric oxide. If you're low in nitric oxide, we got to give you the actual molecule, hormone replacement therapy. And that's what the lozenge does. It releases about 20 to 30 parts per million nitric oxide gas. We see dilation of the blood vessels in about 10 to 12 seconds. We see normalization of blood pressure. We see improvement in exercise performance, sexual performance, cognitive performance. Really amazing results. Mobilization of stem cells, restoration of kidney function in patients with kidney injury. That's just a short list of the clinically proven benefits of the orally disintegrating tablet.
So the question is, why wouldn't we take it?
Yeah, that's what I tell people. People go, well, how do you know if you need nitric oxide? And I go, well, there's only two people in the world who need nitric oxide. It's the people who are well and don't want to get sick, or it's the people who are sick and want to get well. So for me, we don't need to measure. I mean, I've been taking this product now for about 20 years, and I take it not because I need it, it's because I don't want to need it, right? It's like you don't want to get low in vitamin D or vitamin C, so what do? You have to take it. And dose dictates poison. Sure, you can overdo it, but if you take one lozenge once or twice a day, I mean, that's kind of our maintenance level, because we live in a toxic world. We're exposed to toxic chemicals. We live in an environment that completely shuts down nitric oxide production. So it's just good practice to take this as a daily kind of supplemental dose to prevent this age-related decline in nitric oxide production, to where you don't get sick. Or I'm 51 years old and I haven't been sick from a viral or bacterial infection in over 25 years. So I'm living proof that this works. Yeah, I travel a lot. I get, my body gets run down, but then I kind of take a break, recharge. But I haven't lost a day of work due to illness in decades.
So you said one or two tablets a day for maintenance. What about, because this is a product you can buy as a consumer can buy, not just practitioner, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So
again, to answer that question, we had to go back and figure out how much nitric oxide does a healthy human make in 24 hours, right? Because what I want to do is restorative physiology. I don't want to give the body something that it hasn't seen or it's not used to seeing. So once we figured out the calculations based on endogenous NO production, how much we get from the diet and in normal conditions through normal dietary patterns, then we could dial in an amount of nitric oxide that could recapitulate normal nitric oxide production and signaling. So really that one lozenge a day is kind of our maintenance dose. But there are those who are really compromised. We published in 2010, 2011 on a 15-year-old pediatric patient at Texas Children's Hospital. He needed one lozenge every 4 to 5 hours to manage his blood pressure. So everybody's different. And it depends upon your underlying conditions. If you're just kind of taking it as a supplement, as a maintenance to titrate up your levels, or if you have a number of metabolic issues and health conditions, then, we rely on the healthcare practitioner to titrate in a dose based on that individual patient.
Got it. And what would be the symptoms of you taking too much?
Well, there's only two signs of toxicity. One is low blood pressure, what we call orthostatic hypotension, because if you dilate the blood vessels too much, you lose perfusion pressure. So if you stand up, gravity's working against you and you'll hypoperfuse the brain. You may get lightheaded and get syncope and perhaps even pass out. But so number one is hypotension. Number two is a more serious condition called methemoglobinemia, where too much nitric oxide can oxidize the heme iron of hemoglobin and reduce the oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cells. So you'll see the cyanosis around the lips will typically get blue. In fact, this is what's called blue baby syndrome, infantile methemoglobinemia. But we've never seen that clinically, especially in, even through inhaled nitric oxide production or through dietary supplements. But orthostatic hypotension, if you put 4 or 5 of those lozenges in your mouth at one time, there's no promises that you're not going to get lightheaded and have an unsafe drop in blood pressure. But when used as instructed or as indicated, we haven't had any safety concerns whatsoever because we understand the science. We understand how the human body makes nitric oxide, and we're giving that back at the right doses.
Perfect. And so just how does your product technology differ from other products in the market? I mean, you already said there's lots of research, so just give me a little bit more information.
Well, consumers are confused. So if you just Google nitric oxide dietary supplements, you're going to get thousands of products. And most of these, I put them in kind of three categories. Number one are products that contain arginine or citrulline. These are amino acids that the body can use to make nitric oxide, recycle the citrulline into arginine, and then go to make nitric oxide. But the issue with nitric oxide deficiency is we're never deficient in those amino acids. That's not the reason for nitric oxide deficiency. The underlying problem is that the enzyme is unable to utilize L-arginine to make nitric oxide. So giving more arginine doesn't make any sense. So I tell people, if that product contains arginine or citrulline, then save your money. The companies and the formulators behind that product just simply don't understand the science and the enzymology and the biochemistry. If they did, they wouldn't put arginine or citrulline in the product. Then number two, we discussed are the beetroot products. And as I mentioned, 95% of the commercial beetroot products out there provide zero nitric oxide benefit. And then now there's these other delivery forms of, beetroot capsules, things like epicatechins, grapeseed extract, all these activators and stimulators. But again, the enzyme has to be functional in order for these activators and stimulators to produce nitric oxide. And in most people, that enzyme isn't active. That's why they're nitric oxide deficient. So taking activators or stimulators isn't going to produce nitric oxide gas. Then the other thing, if you're eating a diet full of sugar, or you're getting your supplements through a sugar-laden product, a hydrated sugar matrix, then you completely shut down nitric oxide production. Not only are you changing the oral microbiome, but you're completely killing the function of the nitric oxide synthase enzyme in the lining of the blood vessel. So these are all the considerations that a consumer has to know about to make informed and educated decisions about the products that are out there. And in order to clear this confusion, several years ago, I coined a term and I trademarked it called nutraceuticals. Nutraceuticals are nutrients that are designed to enhance or supplement certain nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin D, things like that. Nutraceuticals are things that specifically produce nitric oxide gas. So any product that we bring to market, we've got a nitric oxide analyzer, gas phase analyzer. Our products produce nitric oxide that we can quantify, we can detect, and we can verify. And those are called nutraceuticals. They're not nutraceuticals. Nutraceuticals typically don't work. And nutraceuticals are my line of products that produce nitric oxide gas. So if your body can't make it, we do it for you. And that's why we're different than any other companies out there. Sure, there are products out there that are far less inexpensive, but our metric is nitric oxide. We set the standard, we've raised the standards, and I think when we go out and educate and inform consumers, then they'll make informed and smart decisions, and these other companies will go away because they've lost their customer base, because we've revealed the truth about product technology.
It's about the quality.
That's right.
So can we just loop back? So, over my years, I've met lots of people that are lymphatic compromised, whether it was lymphedema, whether it was part of a cancer surgery or etc. So just come back to the enhancing the permeability of the lymphatic vessel. Just if you can just enhance a little bit of information just for the layman to understand why nitric oxide will actually help you with a lymphatic condition.
Well, I think when we look at the integrity of the lymphatics, and similar to the cardiovascular system, we have to look at the function of the endothelial cells. And with endothelial dysfunction, then not only are you eliminating the barrier function of the lymphatics, but you're losing the contractility. And lymph, especially in the lower extremities, is working against gravity. So it's the muscle contraction, the mobility and the motility of the lymphatic system that pushes this lymph up and prevents the pooling in the lower extremities. And that's why exercise, movement, muscle contraction is really the paramount for patients with lymphatic disease or lymphedema we have to contract those muscles to propel that lymph up and clear it through the lymph nodes and clear it through normal excretion routes. But again, if we can restore the production of nitric oxide, you can maintain that vaso relaxation and contractility that allow for the propulsion of that lymph and restore normal function. But and then I think in the devices that you have that I use in the mornings, especially even my kids when they start to get sick and their lymph nodes start to swell, we can use that certain frequency to activate that to mobilize the lymph and really clear it. And you look back, I can't remember the exact when this was, but these frequencies were published years ago, and maybe in the late 90s, it was realized that humming at a frequency of about 130 hertz can stimulate nitric oxide production, lower blood pressure, things like that. So any device or any frequency where you can kind of mimic that can enhance nitric oxide production, mobilize fluid, dilate blood vessels. And I think that's why your device works so well, because it's probably hitting on that and starting to mobilize the lymph and activate the lymphatic system.
Interesting. You say there. We've been, I spent about a week now buried in research on frequency, and I found one particular paper, not many on stimulating nitric oxide, but on frequency. And it is quite fascinating to see the amount of research out there that is available when you change the frequency of the body, what it does, even done on the cellular or DNA level, So, I think it's the future of where we're heading, but
yeah, for sure. So, well, the frequency depends upon the volume of the compartment. So people with different size nasal cavities or different size oral, the volume of the oral cavity, frequency may differ based on the volume. And so this is why this becomes so individualized, and it's difficult to put a one-size-fits-all on it because we're all different, right? But I think if we can get within a certain range, then we can activate it, because there's maybe 5-10% difference from person to person. But if we can get in that range and start to activate that and clear the lymph and enhance the function of the lymphatics, then I think we're all going to be better for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think still from my experience over the years is there's still that whole circulatory system has to be considered with any lymphatic issue, because you do have the leaking of the proteins from the vascular. So our training is to also consider, mine was to consider the circulatory system. That's why I was really interested in the nitric oxide, because to me, you've got a weakening of vessels for it to be leaking protein, etc. So for me, and then the poor lymphatic system's role to fix it and take it back to the heart type thing. But, it's more I think us understanding, going back to what we used to do was looking at you as a whole and not just individually, and then understanding the benefits of something like nitric oxide, the power that it can bring. But as you beautifully put earlier on and said a couple of times, is you've got to look at your lifestyle. If you're using Listerine, or you're not looking after your digestive system, which usually can come from, I said a lot here, I'm on, you call them antacids. I'm on this right now because of my stomach, and I'm going, but what are you eating? We don't even go back to that. We used to do that with breastfeeding as mothers. They always, the first thing they did was, what are you eating? Now it's let's put you on an antacid. It's like, what? Maybe it's the garlic and the onions and everything I'm eating right now that's causing then the baby to have colic. I mean, all that stuff is gone, and I think we're coming back to that, and then understanding the big picture so that we own our behaviors. Because I can take nitric oxide, but if I'm not exercising, I'm sitting around all day and I'm using really bad toothpaste, then I'm not going to improve them, right?
No, that's right. It's like putting a Band-Aid on, a really serious bleed. I mean, you can kind of help it along, but, we have to get back to the root cause. And, we've gotten so far away from that in Western medicine. Everybody studies in isolation. A cardiologist doesn't ask you what you eat. A GI doc doesn't ask you. They're so focused on their siloed approach of treating that system when, every system is connected. And I think it's a perfect example is the vascular system with the lymphatic system. If we have high blood pressure, that's going to force this increase in osmotic pressure across the lining of the blood vessel and force more solutes into the lymph system, and it'll accumulate if you don't have an active lymph system. So it all goes back to basic physiology and understanding root cause. And prescription medicines aren't the answer. We medicate more people in the U.S. than any industrialized nation in the world. I think the U.S. alone, as a country, is responsible for 60% of the prescription drugs around the world, and we have the sickest population. So prescription drugs aren't the answer. Our body's never designed, it's not designed to be exposed to a synthetic molecule that inhibits a biochemical reaction every day for the rest of our lives. Now, there's a reason your body responds. We have to get back to understanding, what is the body, give the body what it needs, remove from the body what it doesn't need, and the body heals itself. It's really that simple. And medicine's gotten so far away from that we have to get back to the basics.
Yeah, I totally agree. More so than ever now with everything that's gone on in the last few years. And is it MAHA in the US now? They're going around making America healthy again. Yeah. And, it's bringing it back to basics. I think, if we can, like you said, it's ownership too. We've got to own, I'm 55, not on any medication, but I'm owning my health like I've got to. It's like you have your moments and someone will pull you up and go, oi, and what are you doing? And it's great because, you don't always get it right, even in the health industry. But, I think it takes, as I said a couple of times, it actually takes a lot of work to do self-care, right? Like, it's actually a lot of work.
No, it is hard work. Look, staying healthy is hard work. Getting sick and getting better from an illness is even harder work. So
exactly.
I would rather work hard at staying healthy than work hard getting well from an illness. And that's the problem. We become lazy, and we expect doctors to take care of us. And the verdict is in. Doctors do not make patients better. Cells make patients better and giving the body what it needs. And, I think we're starting to get some common sense back into politics and healthcare regulation, where take accountability, be responsible, outlaw these toxic food dyes, which the U.S. have just done with this incoming new administration, and start to recognize the things in our food supply, the foods that we eat, what we put in and on our body is many times poisonous. So we got to get that out of the food supply and recognize what's the body missing, supplement missing nutrients, and then the body heals itself. It's really that simple. But the problem is that's so disruptive to medicine and big pharma, because if we achieve our goal, which I think the goal should be to everybody get healthy, understand root cause to where you never have to take another prescription medicine again. That's the ultimate goal. But think about how disruptive that to the $1 trillion pharmaceutical industry. That goes away. Those companies are out of business. And that's the forces we're up against, and it's not a trivial issue.
Yeah, but I think that's why a lot of us are coming together collectively to try and shift that and support each other through that, because at the end of the day, we're all here for, I know I am, for making a difference in the world for people to be able to get well again. And, we need guidance.
We have such a short time here. I wake up every day with a purpose, with a mission that, during my short time here, I want to, do things that leave a lasting impact and, leave the world a better place than when I was here. And, as you said, it's such a short time that we have to get up every day and be disciplined and responsible. And, we're on a mission. And now I feel the momentum building. And there's more people that are opening their eyes and realizing that the way we've done things for the past 80 or 90 years in Western medicine is an absolute failure. It's not a failure to our own health. It's a failure to the economy and the billions and trillions of dollars spent on drug therapy. It doesn't work.
Yeah. So thank you for incredible insights of nitric oxide. I'm excited to continue to take it. For more reason to now. Now, I just we always do a random fact about someone. So what's a random fact about you that you can share with us that not many people know?
People see me when I give 30 or 40 lectures a year around the world and see me in academia as a nitric oxide biochemist. But, really, I'm a small town country boy. I've got an 800-acre cattle ranch in Texas. I rodeo. I team rope on weekends. So I'm still active in competitive, team roping. But I enjoy the time on the ranch. It's kind of my sanctuary where I can get away from, we're secluded. We're out in the middle of nowhere, completely isolated from kind of the rat race and everyday life. So that's probably something most people don't know, is that I'm a cowboy at heart and still ride and rodeo and team rope and, go out and have to handle the cattle, a couple hundred head of cattle every day when I'm home.
Keeps you grounded, right?
Right.
I've got a funny story. We don't have rodeos in New Zealand. So I was in Australia in my younger years, and so someone took me to a rodeo, and they had one of those mechanical bulls, that you have to get on and stay on. And, those who know me, I'm very determined. And anyway, they put me on this thing, and I hung on for dear life. Fortunately, I was a good soccer player then, so I had very strong thighs. And they amped it up, but I still stayed on. But honestly, the next day I woke up black and blue on the inside of my legs because I must have hung on so tight. And it took about a week to recover.
That you typically don't work doing that, yeah.
But I can say I've done it now. I don't know if I'd go back. I don't know if I have to stay in strength anymore, but I still remember that was fun. It was quite an experience.
Yeah, they're still very popular here in Texas specifically.
I can imagine. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Nathan's kindly given us a coupon 10% off. If you're interested in purchasing their products, we'll have the details in the podcast information. But thank you for your time, and thank you for all the work you're doing. I really do admire what you've done because, it does take a lot to get out of bed every day to make a difference, but to put the time into what you've done to get the level of research and the understanding of the products, I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It's, we've come a long way, but we've still got a lot of work to do. So just, stay tuned. I've got a book coming out in a couple of weeks called The Secret of Nitric Oxide, Bringing the Science to Life, where, I chronicle the 25 years of discoveries and how we've been able to translate that into clinical medicine. So I'm excited about that. I'm, it's looking back, it's been quite the journey.
I can imagine, and we'll look forward to reading that.
Right, well, thank you
very
much.
Again. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
You too. Thank you.